So I think we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like everybody got here on time, and we may have a few late folks walk in, but as we try to start all these lunch and learns with words of gratitude, and so the first words of gratitude go to Three Circle Church and the Hope Center, who allow us to use the space. We certainly appreciate it. Certainly appreciate the food authored by my sweet wife Rhonda and my sweet daughter Lindsay. Raise your hand in the back. This is their 9th Lunch and Learn in a row, and we try to give you a taste of health and something that will inspire you. So definite thanks to them. Also, just wanted to be sure that everybody is aware of this, but the slide presentation, anything I say about evidence, any of the rest of that has no relationship with Three Circle Church. They do not sanction anything about what I say. So just so that's out of the way. So I'd like to start each one of these talks with just a brief prayer, if you'll indulge me for just a second. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. So how many new folks are in here that haven't been to a lunch and learn before? Boy, look at this. So this is our biggest crowd, and so I'm really honored that all of you showed up. I think the joy word was a key in getting folks here, because we all want that. So just a brief introduction. I don't want to go into too much detail, but you kind of need to know a little bit about me. I think it may make the message a little more personal. I'm an internal medicine physician. I practiced in Memphis for between 35 and 40 years. And when I say internal medicine, I mean everything. I did office practice for a little while. I was a hospitalist. I did wound care, I did hospice. I supervised probably close to 30,000 cardiac stress tests. So as you can kind of see, I was kind of a soup to nuts internist. I did a little bit of everything. And so Rhonda and I moved actually from Memphis to Denver first in 2019. Thinking that I would find, I would go back and forth and just kind of be a part-time doc. Did that for a little while. COVID hit. And then we realized what's important in life. And that's what's important. That's why I'm here. And so that question is twofold. Why am I here in Fairhope? There they are. Why am I here as a God question? And so my answer is, I want them to be able to say that Peepaw tried to make the world a better place for us. That's everything to me. And so all of my studies, all of my work goes into trying to leave the world a little bit better place than I found it. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the date and time and situation when this photograph was taken. I was 11 years old, and of course, those of you who are old enough to remember, this is Apollo 8. This occurred in the Christmas holidays of 1968. Maybe you don't remember, if you're younger, what 1968 was like. I was 11 years old, so I wasn't that smart, but I knew what was going on. And what was going on was assassination of Dr. King, assassination of Bobby Kennedy, half of the country meaning to do harm to the other half, and a world in turmoil, death, rioting, just an absolutely god-awful year. And then this happened at the end of 1968. And I get emotional every time because I remember this like it was yesterday when I was 11 years old, and I saw this picture. And I remember Jim Lovell, who was one of the astronauts, saying, I stuck my finger out and my thumb covered the earth. It gave me a completely different perspective on how insignificant we are and how significant we are and how our behaviors affect everything. And so this was extremely important to me, and actually it kind of segues into blue zones a little bit, because if you look at that planet is mostly blue. And so it was sort of stimulated me to start thinking a little bit more outside of my own world. So this is kind of what my midlife crisis looked like when I was about 10 or 15 years ago, in my 50s, when I started looking around and going, I'm seeing so many patients, I'm seeing the same patients, we're pulling them out of the woods, they're coming back a year later with the same thing, and so I'm kind of on a treadmill that's going nowhere. And I just felt kind of depressed that I wasn't really making an impact on anybody's life. I just, you know, as you know, you've heard this saying before, insanity is doing the same things day after day, expecting different results. And that's the way I saw the medical profession in a way. I mean, don't get me wrong. Look, I'm not against pharmaceuticals. I'm not against surgery. I'm not against procedures at all. I'm deeply rooted in that. But getting to the question of why we get sick, why we're unhappy, why we're not joyful, the why question, the root, we tend to not really go through in medicine. We tend to look at just treating the symptoms, taking care of the problem, getting people in and out of your office. So you kind of feel like you're on a little bit of a treadmill. And I just started looking around going, okay, how do I change? What do I need to change? And I needed more information, because as you probably know, no doctors get any training in nutrition and lifestyle. At least they didn't when I was in med school starting in 1979. And it's a little better now, but it's inching its way toward progress. Next slide. So I wanted to go through, we're going to get the bad, good news, bad news. I always like to get the bad news out of the way first so we can focus on maybe some positives. But I do think, reality is important, and that's why I'm going to go through some of these slides, and you may say, what does this have to do with the blue zones? Well, I think we need to know where we are before we embrace what needs to replace it. So we need to look at where we are in America, and this is what I would call the American red zone. And before you start analyzing red versus blue, this is a completely 100% non-political statement. So don't go there. I'm not endorsing any political views. Red means anger. Red means blood. Red has a lot of symbology of things that don't necessarily, it means inflammation. So there's a whole lot of things in the American red zone that we're doing right now that are harming us. So we have to know, and this graph is really, really demonstrative. As you can see, throughout the 20th century, our lifespan almost doubled, and a lot of that, believe it or not, is vaccinations, and it's not really because we developed these fancy procedures. That's a little of it, but the big thing is we eliminated a lot of infectious diseases. By the time 1980 came along, we're trucking along and we did okay. The last few years, and I'll have a better slide to indicate how we've done compared to other countries, but we're slipping, and we're slipping fast. And it's worse for people of color, much worse for people of color, and we're going to get into some of that. Next slide. So this is how we compared with G7. If you're familiar with the G7 economies, it's basically self-explanatory at the top. Starting in 1950 and going through to 2020. Japan was ranked 45th in all-cause mortality in the world after World War II. They're now third. The United States started out 13th, and we're now 53rd, which ranks us, I believe, below Cuba and Bolivia and a number of third world countries. And that's average life expectancy. That is not life expectancy of people who are African American or people who are Native American, who have actually the worst, who are 5 to 10 years less in both groups than the actual median for the United States. So these numbers are even worse for people of color. As you can see, most countries sort of have stayed around the midline there. Japan is the outlier because they've really embraced a lot of healthy lifestyle, even though the pace of their life in general is very, very fast. Right now, they're living quite a bit longer than we are. And this outlines the median life expectancy. This is a list of countries. The comparable to us is 82.4, and we are at 76.1. So we're losing about over 6 years to the average G7, to the average, most of these are G7 countries, not all of them. And we're spending roughly double what any other country is doing. We actually have a life expectancy. If you looked at our life expectancy and countries that are even with us, places like Cuba are spending pennies on the dollar to what we spend. And it gets even worse. I'm a real counter. If you look at state by state, in Alabama, we're 49th out of 50. Mississippi trails. And so in California, the average life expectancy is about 5.5, not quite 5.5 years longer. I think California is number 1. Mississippi's number 50. Next slide. So why are we where we are? You know, you got to ask that question. Why? I mean, what's going on here? I think most of us know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So this is a school lunch menu. This is for California, which is, you know, pretty advanced and out there as far as, you know, lifespan. And unfortunately, it gets worse when you look at the typical lunch, but this is the top 10 entrees at California's 25 largest school districts, and you'll see a lot of junk, practically no fiber, extremely pro-inflammatory foods, and foods that not only do not promote health, but cause disease. So yes, of course, money. That's the number one reason why we're failing, is because we're putting our money in the wrong place, and our monetary system is encouraging the wrong players. So deep pockets of the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and unfortunately medical education is influenced by drug company money. So those are the numbers, the most likely to prescribe. We have $300 billion in drug sales over a year, and I think the number is $20 billion marketing to physicians. So this is one of the reasons why we are where we are. And there's just no incentive for anybody in the system to sit down and talk to you the way I'm talking to you. Obviously, I'm not getting forgot to do a disclaimer on the front end. I received nothing. This is all volunteer, and none of the food is paid for. You know, this is all, so there's no disclosure. Next. So I don't know how many of you watched the 60 Minutes episode on Wegovy. They got about 5 minutes into it, and I was already typing out an email to them, as was the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, because it's basically turned into an infomercial for Wegovy. And Ozempic is kind of the same thing, and it's obviously the hottest drug. I'm not against these drugs in the right patients, but to promote it like it's somehow a salvation, and you know, first of all, we don't know the long-term side effects. It seems like a reasonably safe drug unless your stomach quits emptying and you start throwing up and you can't stop. That is a pretty bad side effect, and there's plenty of case reports on that. But the point I bring this slide up is that if you watch this and you listen to these experts from different, you know, very prestigious universities talking about it, then you go onto the website and you Google these folks and you drill it down. They're getting paid by the manufacturers of the drug, and they're the ones promoting it. 60 Minutes, you look at who their sponsors are. There's several pharmaceutical companies. You watch a 60 Minutes episode and you'll see they're not going to say anything negative about the drug. If they do, they're going to soft sell. Next slide. I'm getting kind of worn out with the negativity here, so I'm going to speed through here a little bit. I put these slides up just to remind you. I don't know how many of you have been watching football lately, but I am so sick and tired of having it my way. And then somebody telling me I'm going to rule. Well, unfortunately, that reign ends when you're headed to the emergency room with chest pain. Your reign ends. You don't rule anymore. This is a terrible message to be sending to people about what we should be eating. That's pizza. That's not any better. Certainly not any better. Loaded, saturated. This is just disease in a canister. Yeah, even Chick-fil-A, which everybody loves and is addicted to, it's healthier than KFC. That's a pretty low bar. The thing that I'm most pleased about with Chick-fil-A is that they don't allow people and they don't sell this to people on Sundays. That's the positive. And guess what? If you want to eat all those things, all you got to do is take a pill or take a shot. Read the fine print, and you'll see that the average reduction of the A1C on Jardiance is about 1. I'll tell you about the very first patient I saw at the Hope Center. It was a man who has been struggling with diabetes all of his life. His A1C was 10.5. I put him on, I had an hour-long discussion with him. He understood what I was saying. He got it. 7 weeks later, he came back and he came into the office like, Doc, I got my blood drawn today. I'm really, really nervous about it. And I looked at him and I hardly recognized him, even after 7 weeks. And I went, is that you? And he sat down and we talked. He didn't have an appointment, but I had an opening. And so I said, don't worry about your numbers, okay? Don't worry about your numbers. All I know is, he said, I've lost 2.5 inches on my waist. I said, that tells me all I need to know right there. Your insulin resistance is better. Your labs may or may not be a lot better. I think they're going to be better. But you didn't even give the A1C 3 months, because if you know how A1Cs work, you've got to give it 3 months. Otherwise, you're measuring the behavior before you made the intervention. He had only given it about half of an effort. And he gave it 100% effort, but his lab only reflected half of his effort, if you follow that. I see a lot of heads nodding. I got his reports the next day, and I swear to you, I had to get a sticky note out and run his birthday and run his name, and I kept doing this, and I'm going, this can't be the same man. It just can't be. There's no way this is the same man. It was. So he had a serum triglyceride of 2,200, which, if any of you know, normal, anything above 150 is very problematic. He was on this many meds. He stayed on the meds. I didn't follow him on that, but his triglycerides went from 2,200 to 400 in, 70, 80% if you're a good mathematician. His A1C dropped from 10.5 to 6.5, 4 points in just 7 weeks, only reflecting half of his effort. His serum cholesterol went from 295 to 115. And that's with 7 weeks of whole food, plant-based food, and doing nothing else. So I know that's anecdotal, but it's also powerful. So if you're curious about the blue zones, and we're going to get into a little bit of that, but I wanted to make sure you understood where a lot of the dietary data that I really rely on, and that a lot of the experts that I trust rely on, the Adventists, are the one blue zone. Loma Linda, California is the one American blue zone. We'll talk a little bit about them. But they've been studied now for 70 plus years. And the data on them is so cool, because if you look at them, they've got a very healthy lifestyle. They're very regular churchgoers. They have a very strong community support. They're really, they don't smoke. They're active. So they're doing a lot of right things. And the great thing is they have one difference. And they kind of, some of them follow the strict Adventist diet. Some of them add a little cheese. Some of them add a little fish. Some of them go full bore omnivore everything. And so what a perfect group that are genetically and behaviorally identical over a period of long time. And let's see what the numbers show. Well, over the past number of years, and there's been 3 large Adventist studies with, you can see 61,000 participants in this one, and you can see BMI much lower in the vegan group. I'm not a huge fan of the word vegan. I'm not against it, but all that does is it kind of tells me what you don't eat. I really like to say whole food, plant-based, because I really want people to know that's our goal. You can eat French fries and be a vegan, so let's be careful with it. Although this doesn't delineate with that, which tells me there's even more room over here, because we don't know how healthy, if the vegan diet included processed food, or if it, but even without even that caveat, they're still doing so much better than the others in BMI. And look at the diabetes; it's about 1/3 of the non-vegetarian group. So why in my profession do I not get any love? Getting a little more than I used to, but why don't I get any love? And the reason is it's hard. It's not easy. Doctors don't have the time. It's a time thing. It's a money thing. There's a lot of reasons. I think you can all guess what they are, and I'm not beating up on my profession. It's just the way things are. This information's not widely available, and you look at television and see what's being advertised to you, you think that's normal. So we're making progress. If you look, this is from Harvard, and I apologize for the blurriness of it, but if you'll bear with me, this is a healthy eating plate. It's much different than it used to be, where it had meat, dairy, and all that other good stuff, bad stuff in it. The vegetables has risen, so even, they say healthy protein, so that they don't offend anybody. But basically, this is the current healthy plate, and if you look at any major university, Harvard, Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson Cancer Center, they're all going to be saying the same thing, which is in different ways, which is Mediterranean diet, which is plant-centered, plant-forward, those kinds of things. Next slide. So there is progress in medical education. There's a lifestyle curriculum in some places. They're few and far between. You can see at the bottom there, Loma Linda University has everything, which doesn't surprise me a bit. So why do my colleagues not appreciate the science behind food? And it's because we're kind of stuck in the medical model of the scientific method, which is a great method when you're trying to determine whether or not a drug works or not, because you have a placebo. So nobody knows if they're getting a placebo or the real pill. The researchers don't know it. The patients don't know it. It's double blind, that's what that means. And it's randomized, so you're picking a group of controlled people and you're giving them meds over a period of time, and you're measuring their outcomes. That's easy to do with drugs. In order to create a study like that proves causation with food, let me give you just kind of an idea of what that would mean to fulfill the scientific method. So let's just say your idea is that kale prevents chronic disease, or kale treats chronic disease. So you're going to have to come up with real kale and fake kale. And it's going to have to be such good fake kale that it's going to fool everybody. They're not going to know whether they're eating nutrient-empty kale or real kale. Nobody's going to know, and so that's the way you do it, and then you follow them out for a few years and see whether or not the outcomes are any different. As you can see, it's not a model that works for nutrition. Here's what does work, and that is following hundreds of thousands of people over a long period of time. And I'll take this moment to make a plug for a couple of documentaries on Netflix. If any of you are aware of You Are What You Eat, how many people have seen that? Oh boy, I'm preaching to the choir. That's one, and of course, Dan Buettner's Live to 100 Lessons from the Blue Zones. Hands on that? Yeah, a little fewer. That's a little more germane to the topic today, but it's it's really important to know what's been done with the Adventists. And I mentioned to you earlier, they've been extensively studied now. It's fascinating if you look at San Bernardino and Loma Linda, California. I believe it's San Bernardino, separated by a highway. And on this side of the highway, they live 10 plus years longer than this side of the highway. Some of that has to do with racial differences. Some of it has to do with they're Adventists on this side. There's a myriad of reasons, and that's why I think we have to look at each one of these and determine why people are the way they are. But the Adventists have been strongly studied, and the data, it's so much better than using the scientific method when you can observe populations over a long period of time. Here we go. I'm so tired of the negative. Let's get to the positive. And that guy is one of my heroes. This is probably one of the first books I read, and I watched the original documentary on Nat Geo probably 10, 12 years ago, because I realized we weren't doing things right. Well, is anybody in the world doing anything right? There's got to be a big picture. What's the 30,000 or even the 240,000 mile view of what we're doing here? And so, through a rigorous scientific approach with a lot of people who knew what they were doing, they went all over the globe in the early 2000s to look and determine where are people getting life right? Where is this going on? And his first conclusion was that about 25% of the differences between different populations on the planet had to do with their genetics, which means 75% was nurture. Nature versus nurture, the old argument. And so here are the original 5 blue zones. As you can see, there's one in the United States. There's 4 others, and they all have their differences. And, I can hear the questions already. Do they eat fish in Okinawa? Yes, they do. Sparingly. It's not common. They live a lot on purple sweet potatoes, which I've found lately, and they're really good. And they're hard to find, but I'm hoping some of you have green thumbs around here to start stimulating people to start growing purple sweet potatoes, because they are a power-packed, nutrient-dense food. So Greece, Sardinia, Costa Rica. Did any of you come to the culinary medicine show we did in early December over at school teacher, right? Oh, yes, I saw you at Hope Center. God, I'm so sorry. Now I got it. I loved your story. Bottom line, here it is. Loma Linda, California should really be our template, because they are closer genetically to us. They're a little bit more racially homogeneous. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But basically, the reason why Loma Linda is the way it is because of their lifestyle, pure and simple. And Californians live a long time. They live about 6 to 8 years longer than the average Californian, which is remarkable. And you can see anecdotal studies of cardiovascular surgeons doing bypass surgery into their 80s, which is just such a great story. So it's not all about length of living. This is about quality of living, just so I make that point. Next slide. I'll spend just a few minutes on this slide, because this summarizes everything you need to know about blue zones. So I'm gonna, because you may not all be able to see this, so we're gonna go this direction. So downshift, reverse disease by finding a stress relieving strategy that works for you. That can be learning how to breathe. Tell people all the time. I spent all these years of training and learning all this massive amount of information, and I find myself in my latter part of my career teaching people how to eat, breathe, and move. It's pretty darn simple. Downshift, that could mean yoga, it could mean stretching, it could mean anything, prayer, meditation, that you find a way to relieve stress, because stress is hugely important. Purpose. Wake up with a purpose every day. Love what you do. I'm so blessed to be able to say today that I love what I do. I haven't always been able to say that about my career. There was times in my career where I was like, it was kind of hard, frankly, to go in and face the same battles that I was facing every day. It got a little bit old. But I wake up every day now going, how can I educate? How can I inspire and encourage? And it's important for every one of you to find purpose in life, and it doesn't matter what it is. Plant slant. So they don't say plant pure, because the blue zones do have, Costa Rica, they eat a little bit of pork. They know the pig, usually. And I would just caution that if you want to give up your car and move to Costa Rica and live the Costa Rican life and you eat pork once a week, it probably won't hurt you. But it's not the same pork we eat. We'll show some of that. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm way ahead. Wine at 5. Maybe I skipped that on purpose. That's Sardinia, as you could guess. That's Italy, Sardinia. They love their red wine. And it is probably somewhat beneficial from a cardiovascular standpoint. I am concerned about the association, clear word there, of any form of alcohol and about 6 or 7 different forms of cancer. There is clearly no safe level of alcohol, and this is pretty recent information. So if you don't drink, don't start. If you do, try to change over to red wine if you can, and maybe limit it to 4 ounces a day, maybe 6 or 8 ounces 2 or 3 days a week, and I think you'll be fine. Family first. Do I need to explain that to anybody? You go and look at a table in Sardinia and you see generation after generation after generation breaking bread together, and you see how fragmented we become in this country, where we put our elders away for housing. We have a whole system in place that fragments the family, and that's one of the reasons why we're the opposite of a blue zone. 80% rule, that's actually an Okinawan rule, and that basically means that when they eat, when they feel about 80% full, they stop. And I always found that was difficult when I first started doing that. As you eat healthier, you get much more clear signals. If you're eating a lot of junk and meat and processed food and dairy and sugar, you don't get the signals that you're full because your stomach is not stretched yet. So those stretch receptors have to work to make you actually feel full. So that's an Okinawan rule. It's a good rule for anybody to follow. Move naturally. I like his comment that even though I'm a gym rat, I love going to the gym. I like the fellowship. I just like it. But there are no gyms in blue zones. Okay, maybe Loma Linda has gyms. In the documentary, they were all playing pickleball, which really intrigued me. But they move naturally. They don't think about it. It just happens. And that's the great thing about the blue zones is they don't think about living long. It happens. They have an environment that creates longevity. Right tribe. Surround yourself with people with positive behaviors. I don't know if you guys walk into a room and you find somebody who's positive and energetic and they just make you feel better. And you spend 5 minutes in a room with somebody who's Debbie Downer, and your energy level drops too. And that's what people in the blue zones have found, is that belonging to people who are positive and have purpose is extremely important for living longer, guess what, and living better. And belong to a faith-based community. Boy, that was kind of a shocker to some of the researchers, but people who regularly attend church service have about a 4 to 14 year increased lifespan. It adds, and that's 4 times a month. So it's regular church attendance. I don't know how much of that has to do with the actual activity of moving yourself, if it actually has the fellowship, it's the spirituality, it's the trust. I would say this, make sure that your church is a positive one, because as we all know, there are places of worship where there's a lot of negativity going on. So just try to be cautious that you're in a place that lifts you up and that allows you a free worship. But Dan Buettner found that consistently, no matter which blue zone he was in, which faith, it didn't really matter. That's the Power 9. You can find this online. It's so easy. You can tape it up. You can make a picture of it and frame it and put it on your wall, whatever you want to do to remind yourself of how to live well. That's a real good summary right there. So now we can go. So if you're curious about another slide on the Adventist, and if you're thinking, okay, red wine's okay if I live in Sardinia, fish is okay if I live in Okinawa, but let's look at the Adventists, because they've been studied, and there are all kinds of different diets. You can see lacto-ovo, meaning they eat eggs and dairy. So this is a slide about the prevalence of hypertension among Seventh-day Adventists, and even among the non-vegetarians, it's still lower than the average American. But as you can see, it's like a set of stairs that as you keep adding, as you get further and further away from whole food, plant-based foods, your risk goes up, and it goes up steadily, almost like a set of stairs. And that data is replicated over decades and tens of thousands of people. The next one is a video. Thank you. I appreciate a little setup here. So Michael Greger is one of my heroes. He's a physician. He's an internal medicine physician. Have any of you heard of him? I've shown, yes. So Dr. Greger is one of the most dynamic speakers I've ever listened to. His book, How Not to Die, was incredibly influential on me. I remember Rhonda brought it home from Costco one day. When it first came out. You need to read it. It looks like something you might be interested in. We took a little vacation. I remember reading it. And she got so sick and tired of me, every page or 2 pages of going, why did I not know this? Because the information has been out there for decades, but nobody has a financial interest for telling you. And so he's the author. His new book is called How Not to Age. Haven't read that yet. He's got another book called How Not to Diet. It's very technical. When you read a Dr. Greger book, be prepared to pay attention. And you're going to have footnotes, thousands of footnotes in there where he's referencing scientific journals.
In this video, I look at some overall stats on the potential benefits and risks of eating a plant-based diet. It's a great introductory video if you're just getting started or want to share with friends and family. Check it out.
Vegetarian diets and lifestyles have been shown to reduce the risk of many chronic diseases, which now accounts for the major global burden of disease. But the actual direct medical costs have never been quantified before. Here's what they found. Same amount spent on dental work, but compared to meat eaters that similarly don't smoke or drink, or compared to the general population, vegetarians had significantly lower inpatient, outpatient, and total medical care expenditures, suggesting more plant-based eating could be an effective strategy to save on healthcare costs. Here's how it broke down. Significantly lower costs for chronic lifestyle conditions such as high blood pressure and high cholesterol. This makes sense. Those eating plant-based diets centered around whole plant foods nailed the targets for cholesterol, triglycerides, and systolic and diastolic blood pressure 93% of the time, 97% of the time, 88% of the time, and 95% of the time, respectively. Nearly a 50% drop in medical costs due to depression, too. That's interesting. As well as lower costs across the board. Cerebral vascular disease is another name for stroke. Wasn't there that study that showed vegetarians had higher stroke risk? True, but that was before 2 subsequent studies found a lower risk of stroke with a vegetarian diet, and not just by a little. For ischemic stroke, the most common clotting type of stroke, vegetarians consistently had about 60% lower risk, and for bleeding stroke, about 65% lower risk than non-vegetarians. And this despite higher homocysteine due to lower vitamin B12 intake, which is what may have led to the higher stroke risk in the previous study. Overall, if you do a systematic review of all the major studies, a comprehensive meta-analysis found a significant protective effect of a vegetarian diet versus the incidence and or mortality from ischemic heart disease and incidence from total cancer, with a vegan diet conferring about twice the reduced risk cancer-wise. You can also look at it the other way. What if you decide to stop eating vegetarian and start eating meat? The Adventist Health Study looked at that and found that compared to those who stayed vegetarian, those who started eating meat suffered a 231% increased risk of gaining weight, 166% increase in the risk of developing diabetes, 152% increased risk of having a stroke, and 146% increased risk of being diagnosed with heart disease. And if you keep eating meat, you may cut your lifespan by 3.5 years. So better to not just cut out meat, but cut it out for good. But it's not all or nothing. Even just cutting down may help. A food pattern that emphasizes plant-derived foods was found to be associated with a reduced risk of all-cause mortality, meaning living a significantly longer life. Here are the cumulative hazards of death across categories of pro-vegetarian eating, meaning the closer you eat towards a completely plant-based diet, the lower your risk of death falls. The researchers conclude that there is now evidence that the simple advice to increase the consumption of plant-derived foods with reduction in the consumption of foods from animal sources confers a survival advantage. So there are multiple benefits, even eating in the direction of a more plant-based diet. But what about any risks? Despite concerns for protein deficiency, adequate amounts of protein, which means 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, about 50 grams a day, can be consumed on a solely plant-based diet, as seen among the other 1 billion plus people around the world who don't eat meat. Vitamin B12 deficiency, on the other hand, is a very real concern without a regular, reliable source, and I have videos on how to do that either through supplements or fortified foods. One benefit you don't hear much about is the role our diets play in the emergence of pandemic infectious diseases, the subject of one of my recent books. It doesn't take much for a virus to jump from one animal to another, but there are no examples of plant viruses ever jumping to humans. For the same reason, we don't ever come down with a really bad case of Dutch elm disease. The largest and oldest association of nutrition professionals in the world is clear. Plant-based diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, and they actually provide health benefits for the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. For example, vegetarians and vegans are at reduced risk of ischemic heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, certain types of cancers, and obesity. And to learn more, they encourage people to go check out a few good websites. As the Emeritus Dean of the School of Public Health at Loma Linda once said at a nutrition conference, attitudes towards vegetarian diets have progressed from ridicule and skepticism to condescending tolerance, to gradual and sometimes grudging acceptance, and finally, to acclaim.
That's a free website, by the way, so it's completely, you can go there as often as you like, and there's hundreds of these. Next slide. So what's a characteristic of a blue zone? Are these people more disciplined than we are? No. Do they have a greater sense of responsibility than we are? No. There's no character flaws here. It's just the fact that they're living in environments which make it easy to be the way they are. They have daily rituals, they pray, they take naps, they venerate their elders, they keep their parents close, and they have a strong social support network. That's all part of what makes a joyful life. Albert Lee, Minnesota, so if you go to bluezones.org, you'll find that there are over 70 communities in the country that are doing Blue Zones projects. And this is pretty detailed, it's a pretty detailed endeavor to get your community signed up with them. You got to have a lot of merchants agree to it. You got to have a strong group of people. And so I'm going to give you 2 examples of where this has happened over the last decade or so. Albert Lee, Minnesota, a town of 18,000 residents, became more car friendly, so they adopted the Blue Zones project. Cars became much less necessary. People started walking more. Schools agreed to provide healthy lunch options. Restaurants agreed to at least provide an option for plant-based eating. And in just a few years, they have seen their increased life expectancy by 3 years. That's pretty darn dramatic. And their health care claims have dropped by 49%, which is even more dramatic. Fort Worth, Texas, you'd never think Fort Worth, Texas. If they can do it in Fort Worth, Texas, we can do it anywhere. 2014 initiative, 95,000 participants. Their smoking dropped almost a third. Their exercise went up. Their quality of life scores also showed substantial improvement as well as their overall health. Okay, so what does a Baldwin blue zone look like? I thought about this a lot because I really am, that's one of my sort of loves of thinking about. And how could we make Baldwin, I didn't mean to exclude Mobile because Mobile is just as important, but I live here. So what is this, how would this look if we did this locally so that we could bring the concepts of blue zones to us? And so it revolves around, I'm going to talk about 4 pillars. And it's a little bit different than other blue zones, and I'll try to explain to you why as we come to each one, but let's look at the first one. The first one is, so this is the 4 pillars. And so I think we need, I know, we need each one of these pillars or the building is going to fall down. If we don't have all 4 of these in consciousness, it's really not going to be effective. And so whole food, plant-based, and I didn't mean to exclude exercise, the whole lifestyle piece of this, but moving, eating the right foods is one. Animal stewardship is an extremely important part of this, would be the second pillar. Racial reconciliation, I put this on here for several reasons. Number one is it's certainly the right thing to do. It's ethically the right thing to do, and we all know the disparities among African American and Native Americans. You can look at life expectancy among African Americans in this country, and it's around 5 years or so less than a Caucasian. So if you're born in a certain zip code in this country, you can be disadvantaged from birth. And so if we don't look at that and try to do things to bring that up into healing, and there are ways that we can do that. And finally, of course, environmental stewardship. What is our carbon footprint leaving by what we eat? Most people think about their cars and they think about buying a Tesla or whatever, but your food choices are actually more important than what you drive. So what's the nutritional and lifestyle pillar looks like? And it basically is pretty simple stuff. We support each other through things like this. We network with each other because, as you guys know, we're not the majority here. We're the tiny minority. We use an educational initiative, and I'm really, really excited about the University of South Alabama Medical School and my good friend Ben Shrubby, who many of you probably know at Baldwin Family Medicine, who is very much into prevention and using lifestyle medicine and food as medicine. They've got a wonderful kitchen over there, which I alluded to earlier, that we've already had an event. And so teaching people how to cook real food and what real food looks like. That's a big piece of retraining people about what they should be eating. Local farmer support, and particularly farmers who grow vegetables and fruits locally. The more you do that, the more certain you're going to be of the source. I'm not so worried about pesticides. It's great not to use those, and a lot of local farmers don't use them. And plus the transportation piece of getting that, it's so much better from a carbon footprint standpoint to go to your farmer's market because there's been so much less travel involved in getting that produce to your table. You've heard of farm-to-table concepts, I'm sure. And local business support, I'll use one example. My good friend, Lori Ward at Fairhope Juice creates these incredibly nutritious, plant-based juices that are just completely chock full of nutrients, and her business is just incredible. We regularly buy her juices, and it's just a whole variety of rainbow-colored local vegetables that are grown responsibly. So animal stewardship. This is something that maybe not a lot of us think about, but it's something that we should. Ron and I have been blessed, one of the biggest blessings in our life, and I don't think there's any debate about this between the two of us. We've adopted 4 dogs in the last 20 years, and they have been the loves of our life. And one is currently with us. The others have gone on to Rainbow Bridge, if you're familiar with Rainbow Bridge in heaven. I never really thought too much about rescuing cows and pigs and chickens until I met my good friends over here sitting. I'm going to embarrass you, but it's the first time, 2 weeks ago is the first time I ever laid my hands on a cow. So there's really good efforts going on locally. DominionFarmSanctuary.org. Amanda Upshaw right here is the owner of 20 acres down this road right here, and she's rescuing farm animals from the worst possible situation and giving them love and compassion and a home. And it warms my heart more than anything. Longleaf Animal Sanctuary, I haven't had the pleasure to meet Elizabeth Oney, who is sitting next to her, who is just, I hope I'm not, you want this known, right? Okay, 400 acres or so in Spanish Fort, so we've got 2 nonprofits here who are dedicated to helping rescue animals from deplorable situations. And you might think, well, that's great and all, but I don't, I'm very careful about where I buy my meat. Next slide. So this is a cage-free. If you're buying cage-free eggs or chicken at the market or at the fast food place, and they advertise to you cage-free, this technically qualifies as cage-free. Free range means very little. Next slide. Next slide. I know you can't, I'm not going to torture you here. So if you've seen the You Are What You Eat documentary, they go into a lot of the pig farming in North Carolina, where most of the pork, 99% of the pork and in our country is industrialized farms like this. So if you think that you're getting pork like it's served in Costa Rica, you're living in a fantasy world. This is the reality. And I'm like you, I never wanted to watch this. We tried to watch, Amanda recommended a documentary. What was the name of that documentary you recommended to me? I couldn't watch it. 5 minutes. The one on, I'm forgetting the name now, but I can't watch animal suffering. I don't like you, I just can't do it. But we need to at least know that it's there and not live in a Santa Claus world as opposed to a real world. We just need to know the truth, and then you can make your own decision. I'm not judging anybody. Next slide. This is just a brief diagram I wanted to make you aware of carbon footprint. Some people aren't even aware of their food choices and how it affects the environment. You may not be aware of this, but 82% of the agriculture worldwide is either farm animals or feed for our farm animals. What percentage of the world's caloric intake do you think would be covered by that 82%? 60, 50, 40? 18. 18% of the calories consumed worldwide are farmed with 82% of the agriculture. So what that means is it's completely unsustainable. And all we're doing is we're making room for more of it. What are we doing? What is Brazil doing? You all know what they're doing to the Amazon. And whether you're an environmentalist or not, it should bother you that our planet is changing rapidly in front of our eyes, and it's because of the things we put on our plate. It's not just about the cars. So I want to make that point very clear. This is clearly the carbon footprint of different foods, and as you can see, as you move toward plant-based, the carbon footprint significantly drops. So I want to talk just a little bit about what racial reconciliation is and why we should be thinking about it. As I mentioned earlier, we all know this, and the COVID exposed this. You have to be living under a rock not to know this information, that people of color have suffered so much more in their health, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, than people like me. And the disparities are getting wider, and the amount of lifespan, the amount of disease burden, and the amount of food deserts that are causing this. There are a number of reasons that cause this, and I just think we need to acknowledge them and not pretend that they're some sort of a fantasy. The original 5 blue zones, if you look at them, were pretty racially, not pretty, they were almost extensively racially homogeneous. So in Okinawa, there's very, like 1 or 2 African Americans. It's racially pure. They've been this way for years. The folks in Costa Rica are descendants of an Indian tribe in the 14th, 15th century, and they've been living in the same place for centuries. So while we're the melting pot, the blue zones categorically aren't. The closest one is Loma Linda, but I'm not really certain. I haven't done the racial breakdown of Loma Linda, but clearly America is a melting pot, and that's good. It should be good. It should be our greatest strength. Sometimes we look at it as our greatest weakness, but by far, it has been the greatest strength in American history. And as I said, people of color have suffered more from the SAD diet, the standard American diet, also called the SAD diet. They've had more consequences, more disease, more death, more disease burden. And there's just no way that you can have a blue zone where there is discord, where there is where all people can't feel comfortable in their own skin, in their own street, on their own backyard. It just can't exist unless we together come together as a community and support each other and love each other. We are human beings. The artificial delineation of people as white, black, all of this stuff, we are so good at that. And it's so harmful because we're all human beings. And the sooner we realize that, the better we're going to be. And we don't have a chance to have a blue zone. We do everything else right. If we get more people eating plants, if we have animal rescue, if we start thinking more about the environment, if we have racial disharmony, we have no chance at a blue zone, I'll just guarantee you. I gave you a couple of local resources on the previous pillar. I've been asked not to disclose the initiative here. If you've been to any of the last blue zones, not the blue zones, but the last 3 lunch and learns I did in 2023, we talked about this group. I won't mention the name. If you're aware of that group or you're part of that group, would you just raise your hand for me? So there's about 8 or 10 of us. If you have questions, please ask us somewhere off campus here. We'll be glad to talk to you about it. It's and my card, I left you a bunch of cards on the table. Rhonda knows where they are. It's got my email on it. If you have questions about what that is, feel free to email me, and I'll be glad to tell you what it's about. Next slide, please. So what does environmental stewardship look like? I think we all know. We just lived through the hottest summer in 150,000 years. Take it for what you will. I'm always amused at people saying, well, it snowed and it got down to 18 or so much for global warming. And it's like, weather and climate are 2 different things. It's not 18 degrees all over the planet. Please don't stick your head in a hole. Next slide. Oh, it's the final video. What time is it? Does anybody? 12:33. So we need to be out of here in about 20 minutes or so to be respectful for the church and to be respectful for the cleaning people. I don't want to get in their way. I'll go ahead and just put the final caveat again. Thank Three Circles so much for the location, for this wonderful place, for the Hope Center, for all that they've done over the last year to support what I've done. The next Lunch and Learns after this are going to be somewhere else. I'm not really sure where. Please stay connected with me on Facebook, and we'll let you know where the next Lunch and Learn will be. So just contact me, email me, and we'll stay connected. These will continue. They just won't be here. But thanks so much to the great people that allowed us to use this facility. The final slide is just a 2-minute video, and it's just meant to kind of summarize all this together, and it's probably the most inspiring 2 minutes I ever remember seeing as an 11-year-old, and it segues back to the original Blue Zone. And the moment I think that everybody realized that we lived where we live. I don't think any of us really knew. I think we saw drawings of it, but this is from 1968, from Apollo 8, and it's the moment that Frank Borman and Jim Lovell saw what they saw.
So by the time we got around the third revolution, by this time, we'd sort of saturated on the moon.
Oh, God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty. Okay, don't take that. I'm judging. You got a color film, Jim? Yeah, roll a color film. Oh, man, that's color.
And so here was something that was different, absolutely not briefed on. Nobody had told us on the ground that the Earth was going to come up. We had no photographic instructions, no light meter.
Down here, just grab me a color. A color exterior. There you go. Even, quick. Here. Up. Take several. Take several. Here. Wait a minute, let me get the right setting. Hey, calm down, Paul. Oh, I got it right. Oh, that's a beautiful shot. You sure you got it now? Yeah, we'll come up again.
And suddenly, here was this beautiful shot, only color in the universe. It would become the top 10 photograph of the 20th century. But of course, I'm the guy that took it. What else would I say?
Did you hear one of the other astronauts saying, "Calm down, Lovell"? You may remember Jim Lovell was the hero astronaut on Apollo 13, which brought Apollo 13 back from death and was probably the most heroic and remained calm in the face of certain death for days and brought Apollo 13 back. But when he saw that, he couldn't calm down. He was so excited. I saw another interview of him where he was talking about, I mentioned this earlier, where I could put my thumb out and cover up the Earth. And he said, we went to explore the moon, but our real exploration was exploring what the Earth was. And so I'll just leave you with that. I want you all to know this is the 9th one we've done here. There's going to be lots more, but I just wanted to take a moment just to thank everyone. Remind you also, I forgot to do this earlier, that I promised I would do this at the end, that none of what I've said today is sanctioned or approved of by Three Circle Church. I just want to take a moment and just reflect on all of your faces that I've been privileged to see over the last year here. And I'm just so thankful for each and every one of you and the journeys that you've shared with me and your own personal stories and some of the stories that I bring from the Hope Center. It's been a glorious year, and we'll just find a new chapter that will open, and stay tuned. God bless all of you.